In 1582, Ursula Kemp was known across St. Osyth, Essex, as a skilled midwife and herbalist whose remedies brought comfort to many. That reputation shattered when villagers began whispering that her soothing potions were secret curses designed to harm. Accusations spread until she stood before the Chelmsford court, charged with using witchcraft to inflict illness and death. What began as respect for her healing hands turned into fear of dark magic. In a time when unexplained misfortunes could mark someone as a servant of the devil, Ursula was left with a brutal choice: admit to witchcraft, or be sentenced to death. Her trial would become one of the most notorious witchcraft cases in England, forever casting her as the Witch of Osyth. As we explore her life, we'll ask how a woman who tended births by lantern light became the focus of communal terror. Ursula was part of the fabric of her village. People came to her when they were sick or desperate, offering whatever they could spare for a remedy. Some gave coins, others a basket of eggs or a fresh loaf of bread. She treated their fevers with tansy, soothed their coughs with horehound, and packed dock leaves around swollen joints. Her cures brought relief, and for a while, she was trusted. But that trust always walked a thin line. In a place without doctors, every healing that failed could be seen as a hidden curse. If a child died after drinking her tea, or a cow collapsed days after a visit, whispers started. Her skill was valuable, but it also frightened people. And fear, once planted, has a way of growing. Over time, the same hands that healed were seen as dangerous, and the woman once welcomed at every doorstep became someone to avoid. The spark that ignited Ursula's downfall came from a feud with Grace Thurlow, a pregnant neighbor. Ursula arrived one afternoon, ready to offer her midwifery skills, only to learn Grace had already hired someone else. Anger flared and Ursula's sharp words were heard as curses. Weeks later, Grace's baby girl fell from her cradle and died from a broken neck. Grief-stricken, Grace suffered lameness, and her son fell ill. In desperation, she returned to Ursula for a cure. Ursula agreed, demanding 12 pence after recovery. When Grace confessed she couldn't pay, Ursula's frustration showed in threats to make her suffer. Soon Grace's health worsened again, and she blamed Ursula for every misfortune. Her complaint to the magistrate set legal wheels in motion, turning a personal quarrel into an official witchcraft investigation. What began as a bitter argument now threatened to condemn Ursula as a murderer in league with darker powers. By the time Ursula reached Chelmsford Court, on the 29th of March 1582, testimony against her had grown chilling. Alice Leatherdale recounted how Ursula once asked to borrow scouring sand, was refused, and then called Alice a naughty beast. Not long after, her daughter Elizabeth fell ill and died. Alice insisted the illness came from Ursula's muttered words. In that courtroom, everyday slights became evidence of murder by magic. Neighbors nodded at each dark detail, convinced that a curse had passed from Ursula's lips. Under English law, such maleficium carried the weight of a crime. Every whispered insult, every unexplained ailment, was gathered like stones against her. By turning petty conflicts into proof of witchcraft, the villagers sealed Ursula's fate. She was no longer a healer, but the accused architect of death. The most damning testimony came from Ursula's own son, Thomas Kemp. He described strange creatures living in his mother's home. There was Jack, a black cat; Pigeon, a hideous toad; Titty, a white lamb; and Tiffin, a gray cat with a ghostly stare. Thomas claimed these animals were no ordinary beasts. He said his mother fed them beer and cake and even let them draw blood from her body in secret rituals. He also recalled how Ursula once gave a small earthenware pot to a neighbor saying it would heal her husband's aches. Days later, the man and his wife fell violently ill. Villagers whispered that the pot's contents were cursed. In court, Ursula's son's vivid account of familiars and the poisoned vessel convinced many that she had forged a pact with dark forces and used her spirits to wreak havoc on innocent lives. During her interrogation, Ursula made a startling confession to Justice Brian Darcy. She revealed that 10 years earlier, she had suffered partial paralysis and sought help from another local healer. The healer instructed her to perform a ritual involving sage, pig's dung, and whispered words at midnight. To her astonishment, she regained full use of her legs the next day. Inspired by this cure, Ursula admitted she used the same ritual on others afflicted by the same ailment. That admission opened the door to darker claims. She told Darcy that she controlled a group of familiar spirits. Some were male and brought death, while others were female and spread sickness and destroyed livestock. Ursula even confessed to sending these spirits to harm Grace Thurlow, Elizabeth Leatherdale, and her own sister-in-law. Her words painted a picture of a woman entwined with forces beyond human understanding, and cemented her fate in the eyes of the court. After Ursula's confession, judges wasted no time. She was found guilty of witchcraft and sentenced to hang. As news spread, authorities rounded up a dozen more women accused of consorting with spirits. Some of them, like Ursula, were executed at St. Osyth's gallows, their names lost to history. The others vanished from records and may have died in prison or lived out their days under a shadow of suspicion. Back in the village, residents whispered about witches' bones buried outside the churchyard. Rumors said Ursula and her condemned sisters were interred in a garden, their graves unmarked and unblessed. In a time when divine favor guided every step, to lie in unholy soil was a final punishment, ensuring their spirits would wander, feared and restless, among the living. Centuries after her execution, Ursula Kemp reappeared in local memory in 1921 when a workman digging a garden foundation in St. Osyth stumbled upon long-buried skeletons. Word spread that these might be the remains of accused witches, and curiosity seekers paid small fees to glimpse the bones. Interest waned after a few years, and the skeletons passed into private hands. In the 1950s, occult collector Cecil Williamson acquired them for his Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. Later, they found their way to the studio of artist Robert Lenkovich, whose fascination kept Ursula's remains tied up in estate disputes long after his death. Whenever her skeleton changed hands, Ursula's story resurfaced, reminding the community that even in death, the specter of witchcraft could provoke fascination, profit, and legal wrangling. After decades of uncertainty, the community decided Ursula Kemp deserved a proper resting place. In the early 1980s, St. Osyth Parish Council arranged a ceremonial interment on a plot oriented north to south, symbolizing both pagan traditions and Christian rites. Pagans and church leaders stood together as Ursula's bones, which had spent decades in museums and private collections, were finally returned to the earth. The ceremony blended solemn prayers with ritual blessings, acknowledging past injustices and offering reconciliation. Villagers watched in hushed reverence as the coffin was lowered, dirt was gently piled on top, and a simple marker was placed. At last, the woman once reviled as a witch was now being honored as a fellow human being. Her story had transformed from scandal and spectacle into a poignant reminder of mercy and remembrance. Ursula's journey from trusted healer to condemned witch, and finally to honored ancestor, reveals how fear and misunderstanding can warp a town's values. She lived in an era when medicine and superstition blended, and unexplained events demanded someone to blame. Her story reminds us that today's experts can become tomorrow's scapegoats whenever uncertainty reigns. As modern debates swirl around alternative medicine, social media rumors, and the line between science and belief, Ursula's fate resonates more than ever. We see how easily trust can turn to terror and how important it is to question our assumptions before condemning those who stand on the margins. In reflecting on her life, we find a powerful lesson about compassion, skepticism, and the need to protect human dignity, even when answers are hard to find. As you reflect on Ursula's fate, ask yourself, who today stands at the edge of knowledge and faces a choice between trust and terror? Which voices will we believe when uncertainty grips us? And how will we guard against repeating the injustice of condemning the very people dedicated to helping us? Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of history's darker stories. If Ursula's life and trial made you question the power of belief and the fragility of reputation, please share your thoughts below. Remember to like and subscribe for more videos about the mysteries that shape our world. We'll meet again soon on the Late Night Hour, where secrets come to light.